morning. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone present in the chamber and those listening online to the business of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Richard Wright. I'm Vice Chairman of this committee. In the absence of Councillor Alex Hall, Chairman of this committee for this meeting, I will act as and for this meeting only. In the absence of a Vice Chairman, I'd like to invite members to nominate a member to support with Vice Chairman duties for this meeting only. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Councillor Vernon acts as Vice Chairman for this meeting, please.
Thank you very much. Seconded.
I'll second that, Chairman. Thank you.
All those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. Can I request anyone present to ensure your mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting? And may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by Councillor Vernon. I will try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise and ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. I will now move to the formal agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillors Alex Hall, Paula Ashley-Morris, Rob Gibson, Adam Stokes and Eddie Schengel. And as replacement members, we have Councillor Tom Smith replacing Councillor Adam Stokes. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Item 2, declarations of member interest. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interests. Do members wish to declare any? No, thank you very much. Item 3 then is minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record, and they're found on pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Seconder, Councillor Vernon. All those in favour? Thank you. And one abstention, I wasn't there. Item 4 is announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. To begin with, I would like to make you aware that the following consultation with the Statutory Scrutiny Officer, it is being proposed that item 6, review of the traffic management policy for Lincolnshire, be deferred to a future meeting agenda. This is to ensure officers are given some additional time to allow for further alignment of recommendations with the Council Constitution review that is currently being undertaken, and also to allow for some extra certainty around the governance which will be required for each of the proposed options and recommendations. I'd like to acknowledge that members of the committee, scrutiny panel members, as well as members of the public have been anticipating this report debate for quite some time. However, I would like to assure all that this is in the interest of maintaining and safeguarding the integrity of the process. I therefore propose a motion that consideration of item 6 be deferred to a future meeting of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee to allow for further detailed work to be undertaken and ensure that the report's recommendations are fully aligned with the Council's constitutional requirements. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Vernon. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Chair?
Yes,
Could I request that on item 6, before it's brought back to this committee, that a clear picture is given that who deals with obstructions outside schools, because it's clear that if there's a TRO there, it's traffic wardens, but then you get into the, oh, it's a police matter, but when you ring the police, they say it's a highways matter. So can we have this actually, you know, resolved now and just said, and if it isn't the police, let's change Fix My Street, because Fix My Street directs it to the police as well. It's just confusing for the public.
Yeah, I think that's a point to be added. I'm getting the nods, so we'll make sure that that's considered before the item's brought back. Thank you, Councillor Clark. And just turning to our leading officers, just a late item, communication from the public was regarding what they would consider to be corporate fly tipping, which I know to be accidental, and that's the case of where we've got so much traffic works going on, we've got so much road works going on that occasionally it would appear that the odd pieces of items of, shall we say, temporary notices or signage or other equipment is left in the verge. Now, I wouldn't call it corporate fly tipping, but obviously somebody trying to rattle my cage did call it that. And I understand where they're coming from when we're trying desperately to keep our roadsides clean. So two assurances really. I'm looking for one, that we actually do consider this and there's something that can be done about it, and also the question, can it be reported on Fix My Street? Mr. Fanning?
I could take this one, Chairman. From a highways point of view, our streetworks team do police quite tightly statutory undertakers that are doing street works that isn't on behalf of the county council. So there are fines and penalty notices put in place where equipment, including signs, has been left out. And the streetworks and permitting team do a vast number of inspections of those sites. Unfortunately, they're not able to cover every site that goes on. It is something as well with our own works that occasionally things go wrong, and unfortunately signs do get left out, and our officers do sweeps to when they see things that are left out to make sure they're picked up again and reused. It's disappointing that it happens, but it's something that we are aware of and working on. Even with AI surveys now, we get them to flag up where the signs that are where they shouldn't be, so we can make sure that on a vast network can collect that in. I would say, however, if there are instances where the public are aware of signs that look like they've been left out, whoever's left them, they can be logged on Fix My Street, and we will proactively respond to that and make sure that they're dealt with if we've not picked it up on our own inspections.
Thank you very much. And I'll pass that on, and hopefully members can pass that on to other members of the public as well, because I think sometimes they're a bit unsure of what they can actually put on Fix My Street. So, thank you. Okay, do we have any executive council announcements?
Hello, Chairman. Just to give Councillor Davis's apologies for this meeting, and there are no announcements.
Thank you very much, Claire. Senior officers? No.
Good morning, Chairman. No announcements from myself.
Morning, Chairman. No announcements from myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and finally, despite our agenda becoming lighter with the removal of item 6 today, I want to stress the importance of taking reports as read, and I ask that our presenters summarise the key points and the type of input expected by the committee to allow for more time allocated to debating items. Introductions of reports will be capped at 5 minutes. So, item 5 is approval to procure a contract for the placement of statutory notices. The pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 17 to 26 of the agenda pack. The report addresses the upcoming expiration of the Council's placement of statutory notice, brackets non-recruiting advertising contract, on the 31st of October 2024. It outlines a proposed plan for procuring a new contract to ensure the continued placement of these notices and recommends delegating the necessary decisions related to the procurement process. It is asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations for the Executive Councillor, and that we agree any additional comments be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Mick Phoenix, Traffic Manager, and Leanne Fotherby, Commercial and Procurement Manager. Over to you, Mick and Leanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Council's placement of statutory notices, also known as non-recruitment advertising contract, expires on the 31st of October. The current contract is with TMP Worldwide, and they act as an intermediary and coordinate the publishing of notices on the Council's behalf with local and national publications as necessary. The Council is required to place a range of statutory notices in both local and national publications, and the publishing of these notices is a statutory requirement and is derived from a range of different acts of law in relation to specific matters of public interest. So these notices are predominantly made up of highways notices, such as permanent and temporary traffic regulation orders, and in relation to public rights of way, planning notices, such as statutory notices in relation to planning permissions. During 2023-24, the Council has spent almost £460,000 with TMP for the provision of statutory notices. The contractual cost includes both the publication cost and the management fee. Under the new contract, the supplier will manage the publication of its statutory notices in various newspapers, and the contract will remain largely unchanged in that the supplier will provide a managed service whereby the Council will provide the information for the public notice and the locality in which it relates to, and the supplier will be responsible for the review of the notices for errors and also the placement of notices in the correct publication or publications within the correct timescales. So placed adverts vary to between 150 to 250 per month. We are proposing to utilise the open procedure as we feel the route will generate competition within the market. We previously used a framework. The market is very small with only two providers, TMP and Penna, regularly bidding for works for contracts. The market operates on standard contract terms, therefore we do not expect our terms and conditions to be commercially unacceptable to the market, and we also do not expect the rates to be significantly higher than the framework rates. There's very little competition through the frameworks within the East Midlands region. The commercial model will remain largely the same as the current contract, however there is a slight update to the report in that we'll be asking for a price per column centimetre rather than per column inch. This is industry standard now. It also means that we don't pay for any additional dead space within the adverts. There will be a management fee per advert as in the current contract. We'll also retain the benchmarking requirement to ensure that the price per column centimetre remains competitive throughout the duration of the contract. There is a risk by utilising the open procedure in that suppliers who do not have the capacity to process the volumes of notices required within the contract can bid. However, we have mitigated this by including a financial standing assessment within the business assessment quality of the open process. Also, the quality element of the bid will include a question relating to their proposed approach towards ensuring accuracy and meeting deadlines, as there are specific timescales attached to the publication of notices, which could result in a delay to major infrastructure works. This will also be managed through the contract management and service credits element of the contract. Whilst the annual contract is approximately £460,000 per year, the cost of notices requested outside of the council, so for utilities and developers, are recovered. The council recovers the full cost of the notices, including the handling and management fees, and this approach will continue in the new contract. During the last contract year, the cost of recovering the notices for utilities, for example, resulted in a net zero cost to the council for those notices. I'd like to invite any questions.
Thank you, Leanne. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I just crossed my mind as this was being presented is there enough time to go to the open market when the new contract is from the 1st of November? I mean, I thought that's what the framework was designed to do, is to smooth things out so that it makes the process a lot quicker, and I'm just worried that the open procedure might, especially with the extra checks and balances that are going to have to put in place with the open procedure, whether that will be a problem or not. And how many, I wonder, more people are we expecting to be tendering through going down the open procedure route? Just some questions that occur to me as we're going through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. You're correct, there isn't enough time to award it on the 1st of November, and what we've done is we've extended the current contract using Regulation 72 of the Procurement Act. So the new contract will now start on the 1st of January. We have actually published the bid at the moment. We just haven't, it hasn't closed, so it's live at the moment. And we know that we've had 7 suppliers who are interested in bidding at the moment. So it has resulted in a more competitive bidding process.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Brooks? No? No. Councillor Clark?
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. On page 20, it says the council spent 459,300 with TMP, and then it's split into 2, management costs and the other costs. What is the management cost of that, and can it be carried out in-house? And is it value for money? That's it.
I'll take this one. Thank you, Councillor Clark, Chair. The handling fee is the add-on that TMP place onto each advert. Currently, it averages out about 16 to 20 pounds, depending on the size of the advert. We recover that as part of the advertising costs. So again, it's no cost to the council. Obviously, there is a cost to us when it comes to our own adverts for highways, where we have to pay for the adverts and their handling management cost as well. But because we charge officer time to do the coordination, the drafting and the proof reading for the TTROs especially, we are able to recover enough back to make sure that the council's element to the advertising is also covered.
Councillor Vernon?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your report. That was really interesting. I was going to ask you about why there is such little competition for a contract such as this, particularly sort of with the government's Procurement Act in 2023, which encouraged SMEs to apply. I note that sort of with that, it can be difficult and pricey to get onto a framework. And as I own a small business, so I understand that, although I hasten to add, I don't do anything like this. But how can we be encouraging more providers to bid and provide best value, recognising that best value is not always the cheapest as well? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the Procurement Act will do that when it comes into force in February of 2025. And we are encouraging bidders by looking at our documentation, our procurement documentation, because it is quite lengthy. It does put people off from bidding, and that's work that we're currently doing at the moment in relation to the procurement reforms. We chose not to use the framework because we knew that it wouldn't encourage competition, and I think that's a priority that we need to do when we're taking our assessment, our market assessment, and making sure that we are taking the best route to market in terms of encouraging competition through that market as well, which is why we chose to use the open procedure for this one.
Thank you. Just one question for myself. With regards to, I know it's covered by legislation, but bearing in mind how we place these adverts now and the decline in readership of, unfortunately, local press, do we still think this is an effective way of actually advertising quite important information?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, the legislation states that we must place the advert into local press covering the location of where the TTRO or the notice is situated. It traps us into a particular method that we have to follow. I am hoping that when the digitisation of traffic regulation orders moves forward, it's now in its beta phase. This is a Department for Transport project. Part of the consultation on that was to look at kind of, they said it themselves, bringing advertising into the 21st century. So I'm hoping there'll be changes. A small-scale change might be to only have to advertise once. Currently, we have to advertise an order twice to intend to do it and to make it. We're hoping that will change to a make, and that's been recommended to the DFT. And the other one will be the much bigger change of having a digitised platform to be able to move the advertising of orders and notices into the information technology world rather than the print world. We should know more in 2025.
Thank you. And just follow up to that, when you said they're hoping they make it, I've just been thinking my mileage around the county, the sparsity and size of our county, and suddenly stumbling along across roadworks that I would never see advertised in the current. Is there a capacity for feed into that beta testing, or is it just being done in isolation?
We're part of the beta testing. I made sure that we were signed up for that with DTRO. Yeah.
Thank you. Good to hear. Okay, so thank you for your questions and comments. That now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the committee supports the proposed recommendations as those set out on page 19 of the report. We note the concerns raised by Councillor Brooks with regards to timing, but it's taken care of by the extension of contract. I think it will be interesting to see how the open process goes. I ask that comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor for his consideration ahead of the decision being made between the 29th and 31st of October 2024. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? Okay, is that everybody? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. As previously announced, item 6 is deferred. So item 7 is the Highways Gully Cleansing, Drainage, Repair Schemes and Surface Water Flooding. This scrutiny report can be found on pages 159 to 162 of the agenda pack. This report sets out the reactive, cyclic and planned aspects of highway drainage maintenance, including low-level flooding response. It is asked that we consider the report and comment on the detail contained in the update and recommend any changes or actions. And the report was presented by Richard Fennick, County Highways Manager, and Sean Butcher, County Programme Manager. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, Sean Butcher's not here anymore. My title's Head of Highways Asset and Local Management Services now, so for future meetings I'll take that over as I've taken these reports on my own. I'll take the report as read in the interest of time, as you say, and just take you through some of the highlights from my point of view of interest. This is a recurring update report for members that comes back every quarter. Starting with page 159 of the pack on the cyclic maintenance aspect. As of the time that I produced this report, which for the draft was a couple of weeks ago now, so you'll have to understand that the numbers will have raised even in the last few weeks up to current date. There were 69,986 gullies have been cleaned out since the start of April, and there were 69,789 remaining on that annual target. I think that gives an idea of the scale of the assets we have out there. And just to cover off the fact that the graph that I included to show the sort of the profile of how those have been done throughout the year to meet target, it was slightly behind target in the first months of the financial year. But there's been an excess and we are now back on track. The October number, that graph would be higher as of today because that report was produced midway through the month. Moving then on to the next step, which is our reactive maintenance that sort of takes over when the normal cyclic cleanse isn't resolving issues, or if the cyclic cleanse is finding issues that need resolving. Since the 1st of April, we've completed, at the time of reporting, 600 reactive drainage jobs. On a previous report, I set out that we had, since the storms earlier in the year, increased our spend and resource on reactive drainage maintenance to resolve some of the flooding issues that we were seeing in those storms. I highlighted that we've actually made the decision to slightly change that resource again, because we realised that whilst there's a benefit of having civils resource with the jetters on site to do dig down works there at the time rather than come back, the number that were being resolved without the civils resource was slightly higher than we thought, so we have swapped 2 of the civils crews for the time being over the winter with 2 additional high pressure jetters with root cutters and CCTV equipment, and that's partly in anticipation of potential bad weather over the winter as well, to be more reactive. So the backlog of jobs that we had across Lincolnshire is reduced from 1,012 in April to 738. That's despite 782 new sites being added. And if anyone has noticed that my maths don't quite seem to add up within that report, just to clarify, the reason that they don't align is because some of those 1,012 jobs have been consolidated into, we've joined jobs together to be more efficient. We've also managed to resolve some sites just through the cyclic works. So the number would be higher otherwise, but we've managed to package things together with the new resources we've got. And then the drainage schemes part is our larger scale. So these are where we're doing planned works for known areas, where we're replacing systems, doing more complex works on collapsed pipes, runs, and adding additional drainage in. The list for 24-25 hasn't changed since the last update I gave. In future, we'll be working towards a 2 and then 3 year programme ahead to illustrate to members and breaking down some of these schemes that were in 2024-25 that are labelled as drainage investigation will reappear in 25-26 as a larger scale scheme. The nature of drainage jobs is sometimes they need pre-investigation to determine what actually needs to be done under the ground the following year. But we also have some where the earlier stage of the investigation and some minor lining works, root cutting, that kind of thing, means a larger capital scheme actually isn't needed because the problem's are resolved. So we'll bring back more clarity on that on a future report. So that's a brief run through the different stages of the reactive and planned drainage world as it stands at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. During the last period of rain, we had many people, complaining about the gullies are getting blocked and all that, and the county come out and suck them out. What is the relationship between the gully pipes and the pipes that they go in, because they're owned by Anglia Water Board, aren't they, most of them? So are they actually cleaned out, and do we know they're cleaned out, or could that be causing the blockage in the gully, backing up?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I could probably talk all day about this, so I'll try and keep it as concise as possible because there isn't a simple answer. The highways gullies, the holes with the grates on them you see in the road, are essentially where the water gets initially into a drainage system. The connecting pipes into a main pipe will generally be highways responsibility, so LCC responsibility, and we do have pipe runs that we've put in ourselves that run down to an outfall that will also be LCC responsibility. But generally at some point they either connect into a positive water board system, generally Anglian Water in Lincolnshire, or into what's known as a riparian system, which is would have been an open ditch, could still be an open ditch, might be a piped ditch, which is actually the responsibility of the adjacent landowners to maintain and keep clear. So it starts to get a little bit more complex at that point because a lot of riparian owners don't even know they're responsible for the maintenance of those pipes or ditches. They then run into minor or major water courses, which again can affect how a system runs. So ultimately the highways gullies and the cleaning of them are only the first point in the system. And generally in drainage design you work from the outfall backwards, so the highways gullies are the last thing that are the part of the issue in the system. But it's a really valid point that you make, and some of the changes we're making to our cyclic cleanse and those reactive works that we're doing is, rather than just going and sucking the silt out of a gully pot, is that might not really achieve very much other than give you a little bit more capacity in the gully pot to take water before it starts to back up. So we're cleaning the lines back through as far as we can. We don't know the condition of all of the Anglian water systems, nor do we always know the condition of riparian systems, or in some cases even where they are, because they're very historical, sometimes Victorian pipes that things run into. We're doing an awful lot of work at the moment to get that condition, and we are doing some sharing work with Anglian Water to understand how our systems interface and what the conditions of those are as well. So they have come to the table on that, I would say.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Our office is content that they have sufficient resource to ensure our drainage are properly maintained, and by that I mean cyclical works and more in-depth works, so root cutting and having to install new pipes, etc., due to pipes that have been damaged or sunken, etc. And I know from personal conversations the issue of riparian drainage is substantial. So is there I suppose a plan to find out where they are and what condition they're in? Because I know at the moment, certainly in my own patch and with a lot of support from Richard, which is appreciated, we've found things that basically we had no idea whose they were or what they were until there was a problem. And secondly, Chairman, could officers advise how much additional resource they would need to ensure all drains were cyclically cleansed once yearly? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Obviously, I'm aware of, familiar with a lot of situations in your division, which I'm sure are replicated across all of the county. We are making sure when we do our own reactive works that we map out riparian systems as much as we can, in the interests of ultimately it all connects, it's all interconnected, and it's counterintuitive not to. There's a limit on how much what we would call without prejudice works that we can do, because we're essentially doing work that is not legally the responsibility of Lincolnshire County Council in the interests of solving a problem that might be delaying works on something that is the responsibility of Lincolnshire County Council. So we always have to be mindful of that. But there is a big mapping piece going on, and our contractor Balfour Beatty has invested in a much better system this year, which we've started running, that helps us to ascertain anything, be it LCC or riparian or Anglian Water, and even link CCTV video footage of those and condition ratings for each of those. So the work goes on. It's disappointing that we don't have a better asset register at the moment now, but it's a national problem, to be honest, based on the way that things have been done since the turn of the century, and how well things have been recorded. I couldn't answer off the top of my head how much resource we'd need to commit to a full cyclic cleanse of every asset, but I will take that away and give an indicative cost.
Councillor Rawlins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Richard, for your update regarding the cyclical maintenance. An issue that I have brought up with you before is issues of, particularly in one of the villages I represent, which you'll be aware of, which is septic contamination of the drainage system when it's overwhelmed by large influxes of water. And I know we've had some joint working with Anglian Water Authority on that. But do you have a plan to look at those problems in a timely and apposite manner, where it's causing quite a lot of distress to local residents and sort of environmental issues as well? And also, do we have a strategy going forward of how we're going to look at capital projects that might be a joint enterprise with Anglian Water Authority? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlins. First part of the question, we have regular meetings where the local highways manager meets with various partner drainage authorities over issues that are going on, and Anglian Water do bring those situations to the table. Again, there's not always a clear-cut answer for each of those instances. Generally, when foul systems that produce sewage are being overwhelmed by surface water, that's meaning that they're not sealed themselves. And if the surface water that can't get away blocks up those systems, it can, even though it's not an LCC asset, cause it not to work. The complication comes when, as Councillor Carker said, sometimes the surface water links into the Anglian water system to get away anyways. That's its. So there's a bigger project needed there. And I think that takes me into the answer to the second part of your question, which is we need to work together. I'd like to think if anyone's aware of any of those situations that don't seem to be addressed, hopefully they're already on those flood board radars as projects where we are doing joint enterprises with Anglian Water to try and jointly fund solutions and look at situations where Anglian Water have actually contributed to us disconnecting our highways surface water system from their systems, because that might be it's a cheaper spend ultimately to find a different outfall for that water. But likewise, our floods and water team that report to Floods and Water Scrutiny Committee do have funding available for partnership schemes and do look for granting aid opportunities that are bigger than just a highways asset issue.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Richard, for the report. My query is about the cyclic cleaning and reports that come in on Fix My Street about puddling of water on the highway where it's curbed roads and there are gullies there. I've had a couple of cases recently where people have contacted me having reported it, and they're quite upset that we're just saying that it'll have to wait for the cyclic clean and that the water is remaining there for quite a long period. And I just wondered if I could have some clarity on how that all works. And I think really Fix My Street could do with a little bit more clarity on the explanation as to what it is waiting for, and if some sort of time span could be given as to when they will get cleared out those gullies that are causing the puddling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. If I kind of give a personal opinion as an officer, some of those gullies that we are saying are going to have to wait for the cyclic clean are probably things that I, as an officer, and my teams would give that answer because, as I mentioned to Councillor Smith and in the report, with that backlog of reactive works, our prioritisation and our triage of those works is essentially, number one, is there a risk to property or life? So that's internal property. Then we would be looking at the sites where is there a risk to external property? So are people's gardens going to get flooded? Or their driveway is going to get flooded? Is it lapping up against that situation? So they're going to then come next on the list. We'd then be looking at any pooling over half carriageway that isn't a risk to life but is large pooling in the road. And then under half carriageway pooling, which is the puddles we come down to, that admittedly are a frustration and an embarrassment for us as officers that they're there, but we can't justify bringing forward individual off-programme jetting works to resolve that issue when we've still got sites that we want to make sure people's houses aren't going to potentially have water in them over the winter, and we're contributing to that. So we will still respond to them, but often it can be the case that the cyclic cleanse will attend those gullies before a reactive resource would hit the point where it meets that. We generally work to the point that if the cyclic cleanse is going to happen in the next couple of months, we'll give an update saying we will wait for the cyclic cleanse to address this. If it looks like it's going to be a year before those gullies are cleaned, we will put a off-programme jetting job in for them. But based on the actual impact it's having on the public, it might be quite a long way down the list. However, I mentioned the change of resource that we've had, and we had this time last year we had 2 off-programme jetters, and we've got 6 going into this winter. So we are being much more reactive to those needs, and hopefully members will see that we're able to pick up more of those nuisance issues rather than just the really big ticket ones. And I would agree on Fix My Street, we do need to work, and across all of the works we do, not just gully cleansing, we are actively working with My Society to get to a point where we can give indicative timescales using the technology that we've got.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions and your comments, and this now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the report be received and the committee's satisfaction be recorded in relation to the detailed information and assurances provided, especially with regards to, I think, the increase in equipment and resources that we'll be dealing with what will probably be, sadly, further flooding as we go forward. And I ask that all comments and suggestions raised by this committee be shared with the executive member and relevant officers for their information. Is that seconded? Yeah. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, item 8, Transport Connect Limited, Teckle Company Annual Update. The scrutiny report is on pages 163 to 166 and provides an update on the Council's wholly owned company Transport Connect Limited since the last report in October 2023, and it outlines the company's strategic direction, explains how TCL offers the Council an additional option for fulfilling its obligations for educational, travel and public transport, and provides assurance that TCL complies with the legal requirements of a private limited company. Did you want to come in, Councillor Rawlings?
If I may, Mr. Chairman. It's a technical question, really, looking at the potential performance financially of the company for the financial year that we're in.
Councillor Rawlings, can we have the report first?
Yes, do apologise. Sorry, I'm jumping.
I thought you were declaring an interest. That's what I thought. Okay. It's asked that we consider and comment on the detail contained in the report and recommend any actions to the Executive Member for Highways, Transport and IT. The report will be presented by Helen Reid, Support Services Manager, Transport Services, and Mike Reid, Head of Transport. Also present for this item are Howard Rowbottom, Managing Director of Transport Connect Limited, and Jane McNamara, Commercial Director of Transport Connect Limited. Thank you for your attendance, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the TCL report is an annual update that you receive every October around the performance of TCL. This report follows a standard format to previous years, and its purpose is to give this committee assurance that TCL is run effectively and achieves the objectives set out by LCC as the sole owner. So, like with other reports at this committee, take the report as read, but just wanted to pull out a few key points. Just to show that this year the focus has been on consolidation of the current special education needs transport that Call Connect, that's TCL carry out, and also the Call Connect contracts since they widened their scope to carry out contracts north of Lincoln. And then, of course, it's been a year since they've done the whole Gritter and Lincolnshire laboratory maintenance for the county, so it's been one of consolidation, if you like. Just to remind the committee that TCL is a TECL company, which requires it to comply with the requirements of the Companies Act and send things off to Companies House, etc. Also, that added relationship of the governance arrangements with Lincolnshire County Council as the sole owner. Just in the previous 12 months, there's been a focus on informal meetings between LCC officers and TCL at that supervisory operational level, which is now paying dividends. So that's primarily with the SEND contracts and the Call Connect contracts, and also the Gritter maintenance. It's also worth remembering that as a transport company, transport is a very regulated service, so has to ensure it complies with the requirements of having an operator licence as given out by the Traffic Commissioner. And Howard and Jane, as previously introduced to my right, have take on the transport manager responsibilities, which are prescribed in the report. Just to remind ourselves, for any transport company, failure to comply has potentially some serious repercussions from the Traffic Commissioner. TCL made a profit last year following slight loss of the previous year. Continue to scrutinise and look at all the operating costs. Whilst fuel has remained stable, it's expected that will rise again in the future. And then TCL has replaced a number of older fleet vehicles this year, which has reduced the average age of the fleet by 18 months. So they're the key points I wanted to raise for this year. Thank you, Chair, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. I've got a feeling Councillor Rawlings has got a question.
Sincere apologies to Helen for jumping in too quickly, Helen. I do apologise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thank you for the update, Helen. Regarding the financial information, obviously this is just a very brief summary of the current financial performance. I said looking forward to the year that we're in and going to future years. Obviously and you won't be able to answer this probably specifically at the moment, but in terms of the proposals perhaps we may see in the budget to increase the national insurance contributions generally of employers, can we have some notice or some indication of what the effect might be on this company seeing that if it's outside the public sector, that's unlikely to be refunded by central government. It may well be, but it's a company standing in its own rights. One suspects that won't be the case. And also any implication from the increase in the minimum wage and just general wage legislation. I appreciate that might be a question for the future, but thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to respond to Councillor Rawlings, that's something that we will look to model in future. Obviously, we'll be waiting for information from government initially, but we will plan that out. Thank you.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to say thank you for the report, Helen. This company has been a success story for the council. I remember when it was first introduced, and we were in a bit of a hole with the SEN contracts in as much as there wasn't many providers out there, and we were having a struggle to get things at the right price. And we were able to set this company up, and which I do believe we wouldn't be able to do now. Wouldn't be able to set a company up like this now. So, and it's been a real success story over the years. I'd just like to sort of say well done and congratulations to everybody involved. And it also helped us out more recently with the Gritter fleet, and we were having sort of problems getting that maintained because of people that carried out that work being sort of miles away, and been difficult to get our vehicles maintained. So it has been a real success story, and I just wanted to say that while the item is on the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brooks. I'm sure that's appreciated. Councillor Vernon.
Chairman, just following on from Councillor Brooks's comments about what a success this has been, are there any plans to extend the service further in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's something that we are continually reviewing. I think there are particular issues and pressures around education travel, which TCL have helped support, and as Councillor Brooks has stated, that really alleviated some of the issues there initially. But part of this discussion, part of this debate now is looking at the opportunities for moving forwards, and are there other things that we can do within the authority, within LCC's purview, or is there other work with outside, external, where we could look to increase profitability by doing more private sector work? So it's constantly under review, but I think now we're so far into the kind of tenure of the business, it's done what it initially was set up to do, but now I think it's a great opportunity to look at what's the next stage, because we don't want to rest on our laurels. If there are opportunities out there, then I think this is a great opportunity to kind of consider this. Thank you.
Okay, three questions from me. First one is with regards to SEND and the impact on the ever-increasing requirements there. A bit of a standout in the report was the fact that the remuneration panel meets twice a year for executive director consideration. So I thought that was a bit of a standout, twice a year. And the third one is with regards to as we go forward, and then obviously everybody's finding it difficult in a competitive market. So what are we doing? One, to recruit, and possibly two, to grow our own with both drivers and on the maintenance side, please.
Yeah, so if I just clarify on the remuneration, so the remuneration committee is and remuneration and employment committee, so it covers most of the support around all the non-executive directors, non-executive directors. So it sets remuneration for the executive directors at the February meeting, and then it's quite new, this setup, so just doing a mid-year review in October. But take your point, if that's unusual in the private sector, we'll, as part of our relook at that, we'll relook at that. And I'll hand over to Mike for the SEND response.
Thank you, Chairman. Could you just repeat the question regarding the SEND?
just we're seeing, obviously across the piece, we're seeing an increase in send requirements and pressures on services and resources. So I just wondered what impact that was having and what could be done with regards to mitigating that.
Thank you. The authority long recognised that send educational travel across the piece is a massive risk for us. It's a big budget pressure for us as an organisation, and this has created a real focus as to how we can address some of these issues. Now, part of that piece of work is looking at what the opportunities are to not so much step into the market more, but look at making things more efficient. So in terms of what TCL can do and what the private sector can do, there's a big piece of work looking at the commercial model that we follow, and it's a piece of work that we're very closely working with Leanne and her team just to review what the situation is at the moment and look for opportunities, because I think it's something that we all, within our world of travel, it's very obvious that there might be gaps or might be improvements that we could bring forward and look for kind of opportunities again. In terms of the question on driver availability and driver pressures, I think that's across many industries. I think it's not just travel and transport, it's also across construction, and it's something that it's difficult in terms of what we can provide, because sometimes we as an authority can't react as quickly as private sector operators. But I think it's an area where we can look again, review what we can do better, and talk to TCL about what the pressures are. But I think so far we're pretty confident that we're coping with any pressures that are out there. But we are mindful that we can't react as quickly as some of the taxi operators and minibus operators around the county. So it is difficult, but it's something that we're coping with at the moment.
And just to come back, the second bit, that was on the maintenance side. So are there any plans with regards to apprenticeships, that sort of thing? Because that's another difficult area.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have gone down the apprenticeship route on a couple of occasions, and this year we've taken 2 new apprentices on in our workshops, one on the gritter contract and one on the bus contract. It's been a success so far. We've recently appointed an apprenticeship a finisher, if you like, who finished his apprenticeship last year, who's a full-time technician now, and it's certainly the strategic path we'll be taking in the future for all of our engineering requirements, and it certainly allows us to develop our engineering support function for LCC by utilising an apprenticeship programme rather than going into the open market, which, to be fair, is not competitive from our perspective, because certainly from a dealership perspective they can afford to pay far more than we can when you look at the retail labour rates that they will charge you. So we know that we're always going to be on a back foot to try and be competitive. And on the bus side, recruitment has improved slightly this year. This is probably the first time this year that we've managed to recruit during the summer holidays for new send drivers. Prior to that, it's always been a huge challenge for us, but we have spread our net a little bit wider now, and we have seen the improvements that's brought, and we are now able to fulfil all the contracts, which has always been really challenging in previous years.
Thank you for that. Good to hear.
Nicole Hilton just wants to come in to comment.
Nicole?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify with regards to your comment on the Remuneration Committee. Just to be clear, the process is that any decisions about salaries only happen once a year. They're not happening twice a year. What we do is we do a review. So we do a look back at what the performance of the individuals in the company has been in a 6-month period, and a look forward as to what we expect next. But salary setting or any agreements over salaries or negotiations are only done on one annual basis. It's not done twice. It's just that we find that reviewing the health of the company and the two individuals who primarily are responsible for running that company. It's much better to be able to do that on a 6-month basis, because that way we can identify any issues, we can feedback really positively when performance has been exceptionally good, and we can then look forward for what the next 6 months business planning cycle needs to be.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, if there's no further questions then, I now conclude the discussion on this item. I move that the committee endorse the report and that satisfaction be recorded in relation to the progress updates and assurances provided, and I ask that comments raised by this committee be shared with the leading officers and executive member for their information. Is that seconded? Councillor Vernon. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 9 then is Traffic Regulation Orders, or TRO's Team Performance Report. The report is on pages 167 to 170 of the agenda pack. It outlines an update on the performance of the traffic team in the delivery of the traffic regulation orders, speed limit orders and pedestrian crossing facilities. It is asked that we consider and comment on the detail contained in the report, and the report will be presented by Jan Gibson, Programme Leader, Minor Works and Traffic. Sorry, Jan.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report gives an idea of what the traffic team's been up to over the past couple of years. The background just explains where we've been previously and where we are now, what we do and how we do it. Resource-wise, we have an annual budget of 275,000, but in terms of cost, our schemes can cost very little, a little bit of yellow line, or they can cost more if we need signs that need to be illuminated as part of a wider scheme. The bulk of the cost really is in terms of staff time. It's a time-consuming process that we have to go through in order to make traffic orders. So the TRO summary, it just provides there a total of 300 logged requests last year, 127 completed TROs. They don't really correlate in that some of those completed TROs would have been requests received perhaps up to a year prior to the point that they are completed. But it gives a rough idea of the type of works coming in, and you can surmise from that that 173 requests have been assessed and refused. Pedestrian crossing summary, we are required to do a full 10-hour survey in order to consider a crossing against the criteria. Many of the requests we get will not meet that criteria, so we do an initial test, initial site visit to determine if a full survey can be justified. We're limited to some extent by the number of surveys we can complete in a year because we need to do them during school term time and between spring and autumn. There is a bit of a backlog, but we are working hard to get that down. Planning and regulation reports. As you'll be aware, any objections to TROs are reported to the Planning and Regulation Committee. The table indicates total reports submitted. Again, there's been a backlog, but this year we've made big inroads into getting that backlog down and have surpassed previous year's total already. Forthcoming works, the Levi pilot is something we've been working on for about 18 months. It's quite a slow burning project, but we anticipate that we will be working on this next year and that the resource we have will be able to manage that. Slightly less certain is the outcome of the traffic management plan policy changes. Several policies are being reviewed, including weight limits, disabled parking provision and potential traffic calming schemes. Should the decision be made to expand our provision on these schemes, then that will have an implication on the traffic team's staff requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that report. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions from me. Picking up on the pedestrian crossings, I noticed that we've got 6 on there that are awaiting funding. Could you advise how that funding is allocated? Are they simply waiting for a slot? Is it first come, first served? Or are these facilities which we've agreed need to be implemented, but at the moment they don't have any funding and won't have any funding to allocate them? And I just wonder how long what is the average wait time between agreeing that a crossing should be implemented and it being installed, please?
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. So when we've established that some form of crossing facility can be justified, we pass that to the local highway team and they will submit a bid for funding for that scheme. I don't believe there's any delay on that particularly. In terms of funding, I'm not sure how that works. It's not something I'm directly involved with.
I can take over here if that's okay, Chairman. Yeah, the local highways manager will make a bid, and that will go to the capital programme steering group for essentially prioritising against other bids for capital spend that's outside our normal maintenance budgets. So it's hard to give an indicative timescale. It depends on the priority of that crossing against any others. When funding is secured, that project is then basically designed generally through our technical services partnership. Will do the design and programme management, and a contractor such as Colas at the moment who do our traffic signals contract will deliver the works. We have done quite a lot of pedestrian crossings in Lincolnshire over the last couple of years, to the point where the specialist resources that are needed to install them, they're a bit more complicated than they look when you just drive past them and look like 2 poles and some lines on the road. There's been sort of there's not a lot of national resource around to necessarily do them quickly, but I would assume we're back to sort of business as usual through 2025. So once funding's secured, I'd say probably within a year to 2 years they'll be on the ground, but the question will be the prioritisation of what capital funding is available from various pots to go there. There isn't a standard allocation of maintenance budget for installing pedestrian crossings.
Thank you for that. I think it would be useful, I think, appreciating, digressing a little bit, it might be useful for a future agenda item for the committee just to have a report on how that process works and the period of time that some of those crossings are waiting in order to get funding. I'm concerned that some may struggle, as there's always something a little bit more important that needs addressing. My other question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is in respect of the TROs that come to Planning and Regulation Committee. Could you tell us how long each of these take in terms of officer time to write up and to prepare for the committee? And conscious that some of this falls under item 6, which we're not dealing with today, but I know that working group I was on it did pick up on efficiencies that might be able to be made in the system that will free up capacity. It's just that our constitution, as I understand it, requires that where there is one objection, however spurious, on a speed limit or a TRO, that it has to come to planning and regulation. We all have to sit there and hear the report to overrule that one objection. For example, I had one in my own division a few years ago where the objection to extending the speed limit is that the person wanted the money spent on a pothole. But because it was logged as an objection, that created a report to planning and regs. And I just wonder how much time, how much money does it cost every time you've got to do that process to get it on a planning and regulation committee agenda and a report in front of us?
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. It's really difficult to say because some reports are very complicated and take quite a lot of time. I would say that a simple speed limit report will take a few hours to prepare, but others can take quite a few days to compile. It's very variable.
Richard?
Just to flesh that out a little bit, within all of my teams, as Jan will be well aware, we have done some work to sort of do a deep dive on all of the different processes that are involved in all of the work we do and how much time that takes and how that correlates to officer time. So we have mapped out internally how long in terms of officer hours, not necessarily how long in terms of how the wait times in between different political processes, but how long in terms of officer hours each take. And I would agree with Jan, it is very variable, but we have broadly come to a figure that we monitor to make sure that the traffic team that we've got are efficient, shall we say. And through doing that work, the efficiency of the team that we're monitoring has shot up a lot over the last 2 years because we've tightened down everything and made sure that we're getting through them as quickly as possible. We introduced the process where members will get an answer, a brief answer within ideally 4 weeks of a yes or no of whether a TRO is likely to progress or not. And then it can be between 6 months to 12 months, or even if they're really complicated situations, longer than that. But the officers at the time we have nailed down, and the team is currently operating at over 100% by our own metrics efficiency. So it shows that we'll have to readjust those metrics a bit as we've managed to improve how quickly we can get through each bit. I'm not in a position as a highways officer to comment on the democratic process side of things, but I know that that is something that's obviously under a lot of consideration and will hopefully come back in the report that was due today.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Jan, for the report. And my question is about the TRO summary and trying to understand that, because I believe you said 2023-2024 there was 300 log requests and 127 completed TROs, so that was 173 that were refused. I just wonder, what sort of backlog, or if any, is there with TRO requests? Because I just assumed the difference between 300 and 127 was TROs awaiting assessment, but obviously that's not right. And is it possible to have the number of TROs that are awaiting assessment and how long they've been waiting? I think that would be useful information for the committee to have. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, I think I need to do a bit more work on the table. The problem I have is it's not a linear figure. So in Q1, we might have got 37 requests, but the completed TROs would have been from requests a long time ago, so they don't relate to the requests we received in that quarter. But I take your point, and we will try and develop the table to be provide a bit more clear information.
And I'm just thinking about it from the resource point of view, because if there is a backlog, and it's been mentioned, resource in the TRO team earlier, and if extra resources are needed, we need to be looking at doing that, and because these sort of things are the members get most requested for, sort of no waiting and crossings and all sorts of things, and they do sometimes seem to wait a long time before we get an assessment. It was a great improvement a while ago, and things were getting assessed. We were getting answers back quite quickly. Just seems to have stretched out a little bit now. And I'm thinking it more of this from members trying to help. And I think we do need to know what the pipeline is there and how many TROs are waiting assessment. I'm sure that's what the committee would want, if that could be possible, please.
Richard?
Yeah, that can come in there, Councillor Brooks. I'm going to make myself sound like I'm very intrusive into the work that Jan's team do, but I do have various reports set up that within Power BI, so I can keep an eye on where we are. The 279 speed limit and waiting requests as of today that are outstanding. New requests wise, we get the number has crept up over the last year. The average was probably around 14 a month, and it's more like 25 to 30 a month that we're getting at the moment. The team have consistently been actioning more than are coming in, and we set them targets on that. But I think that I appreciate that it will be good for us to come back with a report on things like crossings, where there's other blockers that are in the way of them being finished on site that aren't just the officer time that goes into them. And I echo what Jan said. I think we're in a reasonably balanced position with a slight decrease in backlog at the moment. We could put more resource to it to get that number down faster. But depending on what the outcome of the decisions on things like weight limits and changes to the traffic management policy, that might mean that there could be an argument for extra resource. But just to give that clarity on where we are today and what's coming in, it is a gradual decline, but it's certainly not a steep decline to zero.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just think it'd be extremely useful to have those numbers that Rich has just given us in the report, if that's possible, in the future, please.
Okay, I'm sure that'll be sorted. Councillor Clark.
Thank you for the report, and you know, basically the work your team did in my area is appreciated, but can I talk to you after it about one street that's completely baffled me, why it's been turned down? I take it the same criteria is used throughout the county.
Is that in terms of weight limits, Councillor Clark?
No, just normal TROs.
Well, we have policies for speed limits and pedestrian crossings, but if we're looking at weighting restriction requests, it's based on gathering evidence on site to identify if we can justify any measures to manage parking. Right. That's what we do. It's quite subjective in a way.
The other question is, when you have yellow lines, double yellow lines on a road, that is projected back across the pathway to the boundary. Why isn't that the case when it's a zigzag line then?
It's just the regulations, I'm afraid. That's what the regulations state. Yeah, the school keep clear markings and zigzags on crossings only apply on the carriageway surface, not behind the curb line.
Thank you for clearing that up. It's just that, you know, residents have got to, well, parents got to know this now, and it seems a bit pointless when you've got the zigzag lines and then the park on the verge.
I think in that instance we would have to look at introducing a weighting restriction as well as a clearway.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your report too. I've got a couple of questions, so I'll ask them both if that's all right, and then go from there. So that's lovely. With the TROs, in the verbal report that you gave a moment ago, I wondered why we have to only assess between spring and autumn, and also I understand the need to assess during school time for sites that are perhaps heavily affected by school traffic, but there are sites that are not affected by school traffic that could be assessed outside of school time, which would open up more weeks to do that. So that was sort of my first point. And the second point I was going to ask is about how the effectiveness of a TRO, once it's been implemented, is measured to see whether it's actually had any impact or whether it's sort of that part's done and that's that, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. So in terms of the crossing surveys, it's a 10-hour survey and it's restricted to spring, autumn and summer because we need the 10 hours daylight. So they won't do the surveys from now onwards till about March. So that does restrict us to some extent. I appreciate what you're saying about survey. The sort of definition of a neutral day in terms of traffic data collection is a school day, weekday, but if a member feels that a site might be busier at other times, we'll be happy to do a survey that correlates with that. it's not a fixed, but it's just a general guide.
I may just come back just quickly before sort of we go on to the other part. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and there will be some sites that are heavily influenced by school traffic, but in rural areas there are areas which are not affected in any way by school traffic, and it's a general traffic issue which is arising as a result of sort of normal day-to-day traffic without a school anywhere nearby. So that was the sort of point I was making, that perhaps some sites may be suitable to be assessed outside of school term time, really, not just restricted to the 39 weeks of the year of school. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Sorry, what was the second question again?
About whether after a TRO is implemented, there is any follow-up action to ensure that it's been effective. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We don't really have the resource to sort of follow up on TROs, but you know, the door's always open to revisit a TRO. It's not, you know, it can be changed or amended, but we would rely on the public to bring it to our attention and local members' support. But we don't routinely monitor, except in some circumstances where we feel it's necessary.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you. Thanks.
At the death, Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, I'll just come back on that one, and that was that does work, because we recently had no waiting and waiting restrictions outside of school in Swineshead, and once those were waiting restrictions in, it became apparent that they weren't really working, because the delay in the time that enforcement officer can give a ticket, it's got to stand there for 5 minutes looking at them on a normal line, and you need the no loading or unloading restriction, and that was fed back through to the TRO team, and they're working on that now, and I had site meetings, and that's all going through at the moment. So I think, yeah, it's a case of seeing how it's going and feeding it back, and you do get action if you do that. Thank you.
If I can just come back on that, works in that circumstance though, but where people are constantly asking for speed limits to be reduced, of course speeding is then a police offence. So measuring the success of a TRO is not the same in that circumstance, is it, Councillor Brooks? So that's where I'm concerned when I see huge swathes of road being reduced in speed and doesn't actually reduce the speed of the traffic. So have we any further questions? No. Okay then, so there's no further questions, so that now concludes the discussion of this item. Thank you very much for the report. I move that the committee endorses the report and our satisfaction be recorded in relation to progress updates and assurances provided. I ask that the comments raised by the committee be shared with the leading officers and executive member for information, especially with regards to Councillor Ashton's question with regarding to financing and priority of pedestrian crossings, and also if the comments about the table and the information available to members, which could be helpful if it's expanded in future reports. And I ask that a further annual report be submitted for consideration in the next council year. Is that seconded? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you very much. It's now nearly 11:20, but I move that we take the final item, which is item 10, if that's okay with everybody. Yep. So item 10 is the committee work programme. The item is on pages 171 to 176 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme. This report will be presented by Chiara, a scrutiny officer. Our actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional security activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme, and we hope your voice lasts. Chiara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I do apologise for my crooked voice this morning. I would like to confirm that the work programme, as it has been published, is still valid. There's a couple of changes, a couple of amendments. So with everyone's kind of approval today, we are going to be moving the consideration of Scrutiny Panel B report to the next meeting agenda, if possible. And we will keep you up to date in relation to any changes around that. Then we have also introduced a new item in our December agenda, and that is the parking enforcement outside schools, CCTV and officer patrols provision, which is up for consideration and a decision to be made between the 11th and 20th of December and this is a decision by the Executive Council of Highways, Transport and IT. I've taken note about items requested in today's meeting, and in particular around pedestrian crossing instalment, so I will get back to you on that, whether it will be of benefit to have a full report presented in one of our future meetings, or if this is something that can be dealt with a swift circulation of information that will enlighten the committee. If there's anything else that you would like to see being included in our future work programs, do let me know. And that concludes my update to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kara. Councillor Vernon.
Chair, sorry to sort of point out the obvious, but we obviously have 5 really important matters scheduled for the December meeting already. In addition, we're looking at another 2, and I think that makes for an extremely large agenda. And I wondered sort of whether there were any matters that were already in the forward plan to be discussed in the December meeting that would be possibly either be moved or sort of deferred to the January or February meeting.
I can most certainly look into liaising with officers to see if any reports are not as time critical and can be moved to, and rolled over to a future meeting to alleviate some of that stress of the next agenda.
I hasten to add at that point, I hope I'm not talking sort of out of turn from other members' point of view, but it looks like there could be 7 very important documents for decision, which seems an awful lot to cover under one meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I think the deferred item 6 has caused a bit of that pressure, so I to understand that. Any questions at all? No? Okay then, I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 171 to 176. The additional items are highlighted in discussion today, and obviously consideration now of what we bring to the December meeting to make sure we can do all of the items on the agenda the justice they deserve. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Vernon, all those in favour? Thank you very much. So thank you everybody for attending today and for the business of the meeting, and that brings this meeting to an end.